So I will, I'll call us to order this meeting of the Concord Finance Committee at 7:18, and since we have members online, we'll start with a roll call.
So, I'll do roll call, quickly, Suresh Bhatia. Present. Kathy Coppola.
Here.
Eric Dahlberg.
Yeah,
John Broccoli. Here. Ed Dyer.
Here.
Greg Gariella. Here. Lee Don Kupka, here, Lindsay Liss,
Here.
Key Ortner,
Here.
Carlin Reed,
Present.
okay, Lois Wassoff,
Here.
Peggy Briggs. Let's see, Paul Rodriguez.
Here.
Kathy Sedrusman
Here.
and Sri Tugel.
Here.
Thank you.
okay. Anthony, can you promote, I can't share, I don't think I have the right credentials in the Zoom.
And just promoting you now.
Okay, so just,
I think you should be able to.
share my screen. Okay. The first item on our agenda, or the second item after the call to order, is public comment. Would anybody in the room like to share any comments or input? Seeing none, anyone online? Anybody with their hand up or anybody want to be recognized? Okay, we'll proceed to item number 3, debriefing on the joint meeting we just wrapped up with the select board and the school committees. The first item is the capital planning item. I said we debriefed a bit as a committee in this follow-up meeting. So do folks have thoughts on what we discussed? Is trying to get a general sense of the committee. Suresh,
Quick one to start with, do we need to record the meeting?
is it recorded?
It's recorded. Okay, thank you.
Greg,
So. In the notes and everything, it talks about capital budget and planning process with the budget process here. From what Anthony said, the output was the article at town meeting, right? Is a definite output of it, a timeline, a plan of like when all of these sequences come in? Because I kind of was confused on the end of that conversation. What the actual output, or is this a year-to-year article to go to town meeting?
It's a year-to-year article based on those items that are recommended moving forward.
From that
But yes, but you'll see all of the other asks.
Right, because a lot of people started to talk about, we should be planning this, we should be planning this, but this process is not for planning the stuff out. This process is for bringing an article to town meeting.
Both, because, you know, what you'll see in the process that, you know, when we show you the raw data in November, you're gonna see what, I think you remember if you, last year, there's no way that we can afford all the projects. I think it came to like 16 million, you know, it can't be done, so. But we kick those out to out years, and then that would affect those, so. The current year will be in the warrant article, and those are the approved projects, and these are all, and then the out years are everything that we have to do. Eventually, you know, we have it on a timeline, but sometimes that timeline doesn't always work with. You know, what's going on in the economy, what's going on in Concord, and what we have available for financial resources. So, but it will tell, at least put it on the radar screen that, hey, they're thinking about a public safety building in 5 years from now, you know, it's gonna cost $50 million, so it's just something that's on the radar.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
so something that we talked about in the other room, okay. The policy is the 1-year warrant article. That was what was being proposed. But as you just outlined, there's going to be a backlog. So how do we convey to the residents that, okay, here's the warrant article for 3.5 million. And there will be these other projects, so do we put that in our report? Is,
Not a bad idea to mention it in the FinCom report. It will be in the budget reports. That'll all have a capital section with out years.
it will have
But
others.
I think the more we all talk about it to make sure that people are aware of this, I think the better. Because we don't want people to say, geez, I never heard of this. The whole goal is to let people know what's coming up and what to plan for. So, yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
No, I agree with that, Kathy, but we have an obligation to project out tax expectations for 5 years. So there's a place that it logically fits, and it might be a prominent subheading underneath that. The Don Carlin problem. But I think it is important that this work, it's a way of capturing the work that's being done, not letting it get lost, and making sure that we can build on the work that Anthony and Carrie and the school staff are doing now and get long-term benefit from it, so.
Yeah, especially the tier 3, right? Because that could impact the projection on the taxes. So I think it's important to, even if it's a footnote, something, I think when the time comes down, we can figure out how to best display these future tier 3 projects. But yeah, I think it's important to absolutely let folks know that it's coming down the road.
And
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I just have another question. I'm a little. I want to get some clarity on what the deliverable is for November 18th. And I understand it's the numbers. But is it also the policy that you're following to develop the numbers? Because a couple of things jumped out at me in the questioning. One of them was Don's question about defining capital. I'd like to see that in the policy, so we know what we're looking at. There's a couple other places where, I think, being very transparent about the framing is gonna help us understand the numbers,
Okay.
so.
If we can have a conversation offline and maybe you can give me some ideas what you're thinking about and then happy to incorporate them. Or anybody else, or if you want to have
Yeah.
a future meeting, that's fine, we can talk about that. But yeah, I'm happy to incorporate anything in addition to the raw data that we're proposing and presenting, what other information that might be helpful.
Okay, I mean, we can do that offline, or, we'll figure out how to communicate that to you, but I think it would help us look at the numbers and understand how they were arrived at, if we understood how to determine what was capital, what isn't, how things are being moved together. I think setting the policy first helps.
Maybe it's a little addition to the liaison report, if everybody funnels their thoughts through you, Eric, and maybe we put it there, just
That's a good idea.
Is there an existing policy now that we can look at, that we're a document that we'd be editing, or are we growing this from scratch?
there's a policy, but it's,
We should start from scratch.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Dawn, then Shreve, then Colin, then Dave.
I guess I'd reiterate what Lois said, but it also suggests that it should be an online conversation here of this group, whether it's in our next meeting agenda. To look at that definition of capital, and make sure that we're all on the same page. I get very uncomfortable with just numbers, because there are a lot of budget items that are excess of 250,000 that are not capitalizable. And should not be, we should not use debt for. So I think we should make it a conversation. Secondly, I think we need a policy about capital leases, and how those are treated. And the devil's in the details there, but we don't want to be funding an annual lease payment with debt. That's
No, we wouldn't do that.
And neither should we be funding, say, the 1 year carryover of a vacant building with capital. That's not getting.
It's really the whole reason we're going through this process to make sure that doesn't happen. We can't do that. Bond council,
Yeah.
that's something that's just not allowed.
Yeah.
We want to make sure, that's why we doing the process now to make sure that doesn't happen.
Good, so let's get it down in writing, so future generations, can look at that and know where things, how things should be. And then secondly, it made me wonder if we don't want to include a guideline figure for that tier one capital. Not per one for town and one for schools, but just one number to say our guideline is predicated on $3 million. Or $5 million, or whatever that number is, that is paid for out of cash. And is $10,000 to $250,000, so because that you could drive a truck through that. And now Mary said, well, we kind of look at that as a 3%. Right, but I don't think that, but this is our first time now where we're taking the school and the town and putting us through the same process. And what would happen if we don't, if FinCom is silent and we add up the school's requests and the towns and it's $8 million. That's hypothetical, but I just want to get ahead of that by saying, here, in addition to your operating budget guideline, here's what we think. What our operating budget guidelines is predicated on at tier one capital, it's not in excess of X. Thanks.
Anthony, on there, you had mentioned on the other one, that you're having a team for transparency, looking at, would the capital also be even the
Yes.
outer years? Like, okay, so the residents can see that.
Yes, there should be narrative descriptions on the projects, all of that will be.
Will be visible too, okay, that's good, because that way it'll be transparent to everyone.
Yeah, it's gonna be a completely different look. If you wanna kind of take a sneak peek at other communities, I know the city of Malden uses it, town of Brookline uses it, so if you wanna have any free time, look at those, budget process, you'll see it. It's a product called ClearGov, and you can also Google that, and it'll give you an idea of what, it will look like, and they'll have examples, I'm sure they'll have testimonials from different communities that you can see, but, it's nice.
On the August 5 select board meeting, there was in the packet a draft list of capital projects. And during that select board meeting, the select board members talked with Carrie, and I think with you, about some of the articles, some of the proposals. One item that was on that draft capital improvement list that was not discussed dealt with the Harvey Wheeler Center for $900,000. Now that perked me up, the fact that nobody talked about it at that time. I did some further investigation about it. That is something that I think would be worthwhile having a site visit because of the improvements that are being proposed. It was not one of the items that was tentatively suggested to move forward for fiscal year 25, but it's one of those items that I think would be a tier 2 article. Because it's more than 250,000, but less than 2.5. I think I'm right about that, right?
So any work that they're doing, and if you're referencing the back stairs.
Not just the back stairs, it's also the remodeling the kitchen, changing out the
We have
entryway.
no capital projects, so.
There was a draft survey, a site plan done in June of this year. And that's what was given to me as information about a proposed project at the Harvey Wheeler Center. Now, you're telling me that's not at all being considered?
I'm not, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, we went through the capital process last year. I don't recall seeing any articles for the Harvey Wheeler Community Center. So if they're talking about, and I know they talked about kitchens, then I would expect a capital item this year to be submitted by facilities for any proposed work that they want to do with Harvey Wheeler.
All right, I'm gonna suggest that Jessica Porter be brought into this, because she's the one who brought it to my attention, that there is some information, and if possible, I'd like to have a site visit at AIR, so we know that when that number is put on the list for November, we know what the heck is going on with it. So that's one site visit I would suggest that we have. Another, we already have planned for the Public Works building and the Public Safety building, but understand we're only going to see one part of the Public Safety building. We have two locations, we're gonna see just one part of it, so it's only half of the total process.
I'd say it's more than half of the total process because it's the police and fire headquarters and then their station and then a West Concord station you're referencing. And no, we're not looking at the West Concord.
Yeah, we're not looking at West Concord, that's August 22nd, okay, but those.
We're not really proposing anything at this current time for West Concord that I'm aware of.
Thanks.
D,
Yeah, I'm hearing what John is saying and wanting to go forward with coming up with our own plans and things, and I think that's fine. I mean, I don't have any problem with that, but I have a concern about if in fact the finance committee is going to take that information and provide it to the school and the town as this is the way it has to be done, or this is what we're saying needs to be done. And so I would rather, we can go along and undertake some of the work you want to do, but I think that I don't think that we should be insisting on how the school and the town are looking at their projects and wait until their November 18th information that they provide to us.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Well, Don was talking about the way that my understanding is when you were talking, I thought I got the idea that they were approaching the project in a way that would not be compatible with how the finance committee looks at projects.
No,
I'm not sure I understand.
No?
no,
I thought Don was just, if you don't mind, I thought Don was just looking for a clarification on definitions or terms that we use.
Yeah,
And just, something like that. So I didn't take it as being directing the process, just
Okay,
answering some of those questions maybe in advance that, maybe it's common to us in our profession, and as staff that it's maybe not as common for FinCom to understand. So that's how I took what you.
yeah, I just want to get ahead of potential misunderstandings by being very clear about what is a capitalizable item and what is.
yeah, it was really, I was not getting into the weeds, Steve. I was thinking about the policy that's being applied being specifically transparently set out as Anthony described, and then the numbers of numbers. It's not our job to be into them,
that's right. It's
Right.
not our job.
no, but it is our job to understand the procedures that are going on and understand the impact that the recommendations that are being made will have on certain aspects of the town's financial well-being. So, and advise the town meeting about it. So that's what we're talking about. Nobody was talking about second guessing what they're putting on the list or telling them what to put on the list or what not to put on the list.
In a sense, I'm saying, don't put your electric bill in your capital budget.
Yeah, and what Anthony's saying is we don't do that anyway, but you're right, it should be clear in the policy that when we say something is a capital project, it fits this definition and isn't something that's a general operating cost or a regular recurring cost. That's,
So are you saying that we should document our policies
Yeah,
yeah,
and then provide that information
No.
to them so that there's a clear
no,
understanding?
I'm saying that I'm asking as part of the process that they're undertaking, that they include a definition of capital.
That they include
Yeah.
that definition.
that they
Oh, all right,
document the
okay.
process.
Yeah,
It's-
so
Okay.
we include a definition of.
Yeah, we were all in this, and I think that today's meeting was asking for feedback on the process, right? Yeah, so I think that
So that they have a.
looking
list
not
of their
only a
definitions.
dollar amount, but also a definition.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Suresh.
Yeah, and to that same point, the policy would show, like anything like computers should be part of the technology budget and not part of the,
Yes.
they have a technology budget for every year. So everybody, the town, the schools, that should be part of that technology budget and not the 3% or 5%, because now it becomes convoluting which way are the chips falling, and like the leases, you don't want the leases to be part of,
Right.
the part of, it should be part of the operating budget.
That's a great example. The computers are a great example of the
Yeah.
leases. Because this actually, if we don't do that, this creates an incentive to buy a lot of computers at once, because now it's out of my operating budget and I can put it in the capital. So we have to just be, clear about that. If something is disposable, like a laptop, it's not a capital item. That's
So when do you think is the best time to inform people of these definitions or wait until
I'm asking that they include that as part of the process.
that they include how they are gonna define it? And what
Yes.
if there's a question about the definition?
Gonna last.
Yeah.
At the November 18th meeting, all we're saying is that when the numbers are presented on November 18th, we'd also like a statement of the
How
principles
did you
that were
get there?
applied
Yeah.
in determining what should be on this capital projects list.
I'm assuming they're not gonna reinvent the wheel. These are commonly used terms in budgeting, capital items versus operating expenses. But in as long as it's clearly laid out, I think won't be an issue.
Just to speak, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm saying this, but you can also ask bond counsel what they would approve as a financeable capital item. I'm sure they have a list of things they have to provide a certificate of closing that all the items that are being financed meet the IRS specifications. So you can get a list of what the projects are from bond counsel quite easily, I'm sure.
And Sandy Smith is consider that public comment from resident Sandy Smith. He joined the meeting. Okay. Mary asked to get a sense of the finance committee, following up on that discussion. If I could summarize, we're generally receptive to what we heard. We do have some clarifying questions. We've already posed those to the CFO. We'll include some time on our next regular meeting agenda to revisit this after we've all had time to think through it a little bit more. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. Paul and Kazi online, did you have any questions? You good? Okay.
Yes.
The second piece from that meeting was the Peabody property. Did anybody have any thoughts on that for purposes of debriefing? Surratt?
One question for anything would be, since the property is owned by the schools right now, in school committee, can the town legally when apply for an RLI out? That's it's who will bring the RLI to the town on behalf of the, because you wanna make sure that you don't own something, but you're putting an RLI out, so.
Yeah, we would put that clarification in the RFL, too many acronyms. Yeah, we put that note out there, but yeah, we can do it. It's not committal, it's just testing the waters.
Yeah.
And really should just be vague and general as possible, just to see what type of reuse that people would propose for that property.
And second question would be the other property, which is the leaching field. Is that now, that's also I'm assuming zone residential, that would not be a transferable property part of the school. Because that would be a separate property. And it has its own usage, so. I don't think the DEP will probably work, Concord could tell us more, if they will allow. The existing fields to be used by a different usage now, because that fields are designed for the school right now.
Correct, but we may wanna consider including all the pieces of that parcel that makes up that parcel, because if you wanna get top dollar, a developer needs to know that they can put the infrastructure in place to get their money back, right? So they may say, we know that we can't use the existing leaching field, but we need that property to do ours if we wanna do X. So I think that helps frame the future discussions and future RFPs. Maybe it's something, if we only give a small piece of land, well, then we're limited to what people can do with it, and especially if it's not on town sewer, then. Somebody was asking me today, it's zoned to single housing, but okay, we put 10 McMansions there. So I don't think the math is gonna work for that, because even to say that we got, just say $8 million for that property. then, each McMansion would cost $750,000, it's a math equation when you start, if they're selling it for $1.5 million. You're in the, it doesn't work, the developer's not gonna be interested in that.
Yeah.
In order to, make it worth their while, they need to have the most use density. The land to be able to handle wastewater, so there's a lot of questions that. With an RLI, what that can do is really help identify what we'd have to put out. If it's in fact that the town wants to sell that property, what we have to include to maximize what we can get in return. Therefore, to offset some future debt.
Okay, anyone else on the Peabody property?
Yeah,
Pete?
just a couple of questions. I'm wondering, as you were just talking right now, it sounded as though you're open to, the possibility that there could be multiple uses of the property. And I'm wondering if it would be in the town's best interest or in the community's best interest if there was a group like the 2229 committee that actually kind of looked at some of these options. I'm wondering, are they planning to sell the property or are they open to other things?
So I think in essence, an RLI could probably do what a committee could do, because a committee could get together and talk about the uses and what we could use and all that,
Right.
but. An RLI is gonna really tell us what realistically somebody's
I
going
think
to
that-
do with it.
Yeah, so can they issue the RLI tomorrow?
Soon as the select board wanted to do it, we could issue it, yeah. We still have some work to do to put a nice RLI out there, but.
What's a nice RLI?
Well, you just have to do a site plot plan and all that, that we'd have to, we have to dot our i's and cross our t and all that, it's just not issuing a piece of paper, it's also giving them some supporting document to, help developers
Right,
know
yeah,
what they could potentially do.
okay, all right. But that's the intent, and the sooner we get it out, the better.
The better, I think at town meeting, it was mentioned a warrant article, and I think that we could have a warrant article that does a couple things that. Part A transfers the care custody control from the school committee to the select board. Part B is also that the town give the authority to the select board if they so choose to sell the property. So this way, you're not waiting for a future town meeting that they're ready, if they want to do it, if that's what the town says, then that's what it is.
When you do have this RLI out there, do you ever send it out to the state? To have them look at it?
We put it on the central register and we put it in the goods and services bulletin. We'll put it everywhere out there, so anybody.
Anybody and everybody will have it.
Bring your wallet and we're willing to talk.
Okay, Kathy then comment.
I was just gonna comment, D referencing 2229, they're not anywhere near the same. 2229 has a myriad of issues.
Oh, I'm not comparing the two in
Just-
terms of the structures of those, just as an example. We had a 2229 committee, and I understand it's much more complex.
My other point about any of these land uses is I truly believe the town needs to have a centralized approach. We shouldn't be looking at these things individually. We really should. If you want to have a committee, instead of having individual committees, it should be somebody who's looking at the whole ball of wax. And saying, what does the town need? And there's contiguous parcels or better locations for one thing than the other. What I've learned from being involved with some of the things in the town, right? Affordable housing, okay? Everybody talks about affordable housing. Everybody talks about recreation. Everybody talks about economic revitalization. Well, is Old Card Road a good place for economic revitalization, or is, the prison property the better place? So someone needs to ring fence the broader issues and then kind of break it down for the various target areas. That's just maybe.
What's going to be the decision-making process on the Peabody Lab?
It's up to the select board.
So the select board is going to be reviewing the responses to the LOIs and decide how they're going to dispose of the process. That's where the decision.
Well, I
process-
don't wanna speak for the select board. I think that they have a discussion about and review any proposals that are submitted. And then they discuss it in an open meeting and then determine the next step. And
And
it
the-
probably wouldn't happen right away because like somebody mentioned, I think Suresh mentioned, you know, they don't own the property right now. It's still
Right.
under the school committee, so we really can't do anything until it's in their property as far as really issuing a legal formal document.
I think,
Okay.
there could be a couple of public hearings that the select board can hold, even if town meeting gives them the approval to dispose of property, subject to a public hearings, 1 or 2 or whatever needed to be. This way the public is completely involved, and to your point, Kathy, I agree, it's a contiguous piece of land, you wanna give second and third thoughts before disposing of a property, because you will not find another property. I recall going back 30 years ago, when we were first talking about having another school, looking at the Strawberry Hill property, was like, it's too small, wish there was something else available. This was a discussion at that time, in one of the, facilities subcommittees, so it goes back to prove the point that you wanna be extra careful when if and when you dispose of a property.
Okay. Let's move on. Fiscal year 26 budget process, item number 4. We're gonna take a look at those draft letters to the budget units, and then we're gonna spend some time on the guideline metrics. So taking the letters first. I pulled up on the screen 3 letters that we drafted. I took an action item in our last meeting to take a first crack at these. I worked with Lindsay as well as Lois to prepare the drafts that are in your packets. Again, there are 3 of them. 1 is to the town, 1 to the schools together, and then the 3rd to Minuteman, which is the traditionally what we do. I take it folks have had a chance to already review these. I welcome your feedback, questions, and input, and my goal is to get approval to get these out the door tomorrow, they're dated tomorrow, so we want to move fast.
I think the letters are very well drafted. Number 1, good job, both of you on that. Number 2, are you inclined to consider adding examples? You know, I'm interested in the ambulance service, so that's a change of level of service. Could we put in, are you interested in putting in the letter? For example, are you increasing the level of service for the ambulance, advanced life support, or something like that? Something short and sweet, where you give an example of, okay, here's a change in the level of service that we're interested in.
I actually like the generality of them. I thought and this is Eric and Lindsay, I just, chimed in, but, they begin in a collaborative way and encourage the recipients to ask specific questions. If we ask about the ambulance service, we're directing attention to that, and we don't know what we don't know. So I think we'd be better off, getting the initial responses and then seeing what we want to pursue. That's a question to ask when we're looking at the responses.
Unless
I'll
you
defer to
believe
you guys on
strongly
that.
that we want that information, and then we should have that discussion, then we should just maybe ask for it outright, right?
Yeah,
Well, I will say two things, the CFO is hearing this, and I take it you're gonna be helping to prepare the response to the town letter. And 2, I know you're working on, we chatted about this interest from committee members, including Colin, in the ambulance service, and this talk of a presentation at a future meeting.
Yes.
I know that's not.
Bringing them
but you're
in,
working on that.
we're gonna talk about the trash, new trash structure, and then also on the 26th, talk about the grant that the fire chief received, the FEMA grant. So that's gonna be an opportunity for you to drill around those questions and ask about future services too.
The last person I want to interrogate is the chief judge, I gotta tell you. But I appreciate that.
He'll talk, he loves to talk.
That's gonna solve my question about it, because that's when we're gonna get the information about it.
Okay, great. Other, points on the letters? John?
We can talk about any letter.
Sure.
One of the schools, should we use this to ask for metrics? Or is that, that's different ask to the school?
What type of metrics?
Spend per pupil, students to teacher ratio, ACT scores, CT scores, all kinds of data that says we're spending this, well, what are we getting out of it? Because they have a chart that just shows comparing like the whole dollar spend. And we always get our feathers ruffled, but if we're sending, if we have 100% Rhodes scholars, maybe it's worth it, right? So we get rid of stop it. I'm just asking if that's a place to put it, and if so, maybe we need to. In another meeting, come back with metrics, or send them to Eric.
That's a good
Or
suggestion. We do, Eric did pick that out in the student enrollment item. Yeah. He did say, asked about the impact of enrollment changes. And it's, and the impact on spending.
That's not metrics.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, but the metrics issue that you're raising is not,
Right.
for
and I-
spending is.
I do think metrics, we need to be specific, generalities.
What I. As I say, if we do it, we shouldn't do it just for the schools. We should, the town should have a metric too, to say, hey, we're spending, the town's spending, right? I mean, it shouldn't be like, we're singling out the schools for the metric. The town should be like, hey, we're spending next to that for the town as opposed to
But-
towns of similar size.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I understand why it seems fair to do it that way. It's just that student performance is an obvious measurable metric. I don't know, Anthony, what metric could we use to?
I mean, you guys talking about life support just 2 seconds ago, that our average response time to get to somebody that calls, that's a very, if we're gonna up this ambulance service, and because I heard that metric 3 years ago when we did it,
Yeah.
right? All I'm getting at is we should think about doing it equally for everybody.
So part of the budget process, we hopefully get some more meaningful, workload and performance indicators, statistics, including the budget. To your point, response time is important. How many, transports did we do? What's the call volume compared to, fires to, all of that, traditionally, it's in the final budget document, and that's something that I've always done, when I was in other communities, is really put those, and really when we brought those to different finance committees in different communities, that they drill down a lot on those metrics, but here, it seems you do the guidelines and then you don't really get into the meat and potatoes, but it will be available, some of those.
Maybe it's the way to approach it, and keep it fair is to add a request that asks them to provide metrics on their performance, but not define specifically what you're asking for. So, I think for the schools, it's pretty obvious, the metrics are gonna end up relating to student performance. They'll probably come up with some other, things. I know Laura always talks about the ability to keep students in district, special needs students in district, and how that's changed over time. That would be a metric you'd want to tell us about. But, and then we can drill down to the specifics based on what information we're given, but, again, we don't know, so.
Okay, John and then Dawn.
Just to put it, local opinion, I'm just gonna respectfully disagree. They're gonna give us information like they gave before, which doesn't really tell us anything. And then we can't drill into anything if we don't have any information. And then we're asking them for stuff. So I would say if we are gonna ask for information, then everyone sends their 10 best Derek or however it works. I don't want to throw more stuff on you guys, but whatever. And then we can all vote, say we want, these are the things that are most important to us. Because all they give us is $1 per pupil, and in district, out of district, that's not telling us if the money we're spending is actually doing. Or producing results in an efficient manner versus Weston or Acton Boxborough, et cetera. So I think we real specific that.
I agree with John. In fact, I know we previously did discuss requesting the spend per pupil. I think that the student enrollment, item 6, is kind of not very informative unless we see the trend in spend per student. Because we can't extract from that what the future might look like. So I'd like to see us requesting at this stage everything that is relevant to the school. And that includes the spend per pupil. If you like, to your point, Lois, we could say spend per pupil X special ed. Just so we can look at the run rate, so to speak. And because we haven't requested that in the past, I'd like to request some history on it, a few years. And in terms of the to John's other point, in terms of the performance or operating metrics, we could handle that in a separate letter if you'd like, but I think that it is helpful to us to see if there is some extraordinary circumstance, that's all.
Got it.
I think some of that information is contained in the school's budget books. The most recent one is available online, and there's, the information is there. I don't know what's relevant, what part of it, but that there are sections that can be taken and clipped. Now, we don't have the town's budget books yet. Hopefully we'll get them at some point, so, but that's another source, we can get some more metrics from the town, so if you're looking for parity, that, those are two places where you can find that information.
Is there comparative data in there, Carla?
I don't know how you compare the town with the school system.
No,
No.
not the town, our school results with other comparable school districts.
I would have to just guess yes, but I want to actually look at it. I mean, it's fairly lengthy. Steve, what do you think?
They weren't in past years, but I haven't looked at this year's.
Okay,
I haven't seen the school budget book since, Bob Conroy's been there, so the approach may be different.
So what would you gain from seeing student performance? How would that help you in looking at their budget?
Well,
I mean, I'm wondering, what would we be
So
doing with the
I
information?
brought this up, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time, but they're asking us for spend. I think we're just looking for the result of that spend, right? So,
How do you define the result?
well, I think that's what we would all say is statistics. So if we're spending 90,000 per pupil, and we've got 50 kids in a class, and Weston spends 50,000 per pupil, has 10 kids in a class, are we doing things correctly, or vice versa, right? And I don't want,
Yeah.
I'm not yet operating in a vacuum of information. And so, we're just saying, can we have statistics that say, hey, what we're spending, we're getting results that are satisfactory. Versus what others, because we always comp ourselves to other school districts. We really don't.
Do we look at salaries? Do we look at performance associated with a teacher's salary? I mean, how would you, what are you looking at student performance? Isn't that part of?
Why don't we all make
Educating.
those suggestions and we can ask for that? Absolutely, are we paying our teachers $500,000 a year and Weston pays 100, but they've got more Rhodes College? I'm just making an ask and saying, if we're interested in statistics, should we put in this letter so they have as much time as possible to get it to us? And if we're not, that's a committee decision.
Let's go online. I see Paul and, Paul has his hand up.
Okay, thanks. I don't know what I don't know, and I'd be worried about proclaiming, like, asking very specific questions and maybe missing the point. You guys have done this a lot longer than I have, but I'd be worried about, like, trying to understand the quality of the services performed without having a general knowledge of exactly the statistics that would make the most sense. So Like, I like the idea of kind of leaving it open and providing information, and then we could take it from there. And then we could ask follow-up questions after the fact, but that's how I would like to, that's how I think it would be better, because as soon as you proclaim, I want this specific thing, then they work to give you that specific thing, but that might be missing the story. That's all.
And this, there's publicly available information about a lot of this. The State Department of Ed posts information about some of this. And I'm really missing Chris Reynolds right now, because she would have pulled up the page by now. And I can't.
Desi has a lot of
Desi has.
information with the schools, just like Division of Local Services has statistics for the town that you can compare. You know, just. Statistics is something that's always, it doesn't completely tell the story, because some of the decisions that towns make, you know, come into factor too with some of those, so it's not. You know, it's not a cookie cutter one, you know, works for everybody, just, everybody doesn't do things the same, so.
Let me, Kazi has had his hand up online. Let's go to Kazi, then Greg, then I have a proposal here. Kazi.
Yes, I was gonna agree with Paul as well. I think the statistics, is great. I think it would give us much visibility into what's going on, but I don't know if this letter is the right place. It's hard enough getting data from them, and if we keep adding things, I'm not sure if that's the right approach. And also, if we do see from the statistics that the performance is not as good, what does that mean? Does that mean we can reduce budget? I don't know how that would help us, create the budget.
I'm seeing it differently, is I would like to see how they're measuring themselves. Yes, we can go off and look at different sites of how to do it, but I want to see how the town and the schools are measuring themselves. What did they look at that they think is important? That says, yes, we do need $200,000 for X or whatever it is. So I think a broader question, and just to start the conversation is fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
What-
Just one other.
Steve, quickly. and then,
Yeah, just
Trevor.
quickly, after this letter goes out and they respond to the letter, we do have a follow-up with them live, right? So I think we have an ample opportunity to ask some of the other questions that maybe we don't include in this letter right now.
Exactly. What I wanted to say is, we did set the expectation when we gave the budget units a heads up that this year's request would be, I think the exact wording I used was substantially similar to previous years. Failure on failure, I did say that, and I want to be transparent. That being said, I do think this is a good idea. But I agree with Greg. I think we should do it consistently. We shouldn't just send it to the schools. I think sending it to all the budget units is appropriate. I do not think we should go down the road of trying to pick specific metrics at this late point in time. I'm mindful of the timetable.
Yeah.
So because this would be new, and because we did set the expectation that it was going to be substantially similar, I want to be, I don't know if fair is the right word, but I want to be flexible. We do in the draft letters, assuming they go out as is, we do invite, in the case of the schools, we do invite them to come to our September meeting to discuss the letter with us and pose clarifying questions. So we could add a general line, and the way we've got it organized, add a row that speaks to performance outcomes. Leave it up to them to pick the ones that they think resonate, bring those to that September meeting, and we can talk through it. At that point, we could say, you're on the right track, we do want to see that, or no, we want to see, I don't know, test scores or something else.
The schools have always given us the cost per pupil versus other towns. Yes, they have. We've always had a bar chart where they've shown where they fall.
And that's in the letter, that's the first item in the letter. Overall spending, please provide overall spending both in total dollars and on a per student basis. So that's in the letter.
But they have done comparisons to other school districts.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's not like they haven't given us.
Doesn't show you.
Well, it shows
It
you-
shows you dollars out, it doesn't show you what you're getting for.
Yes, you're right.
And Kathy, I've gone through their budget books, they only did that once. That was 2022 budget. So my ask was, can we have that for 5 years? And I hear what you're saying, you can always ask it at a later date, but if, I don't know how we would feel if somebody's given us their request. And then when we come in to talk about it, they ask for more information.
Well, we
I'd
did
rather
say
that we-
5-year projection on a per student basis.
I'm asking for the historical.
Oh, sure, got it.
Yeah, it's because yeah, caliber, that's all.
Got it.
Okay.
Maybe a phone call for the language. Oh, full.
Was yours just a different request to ask for 5 historical?
I
Yours is
requested
the
this,
metrics, right?
I requested this in previous meetings, FinCom as well. This is a consistent request.
Just that, just clarify, it's different than the metrics.
Correct, 5-year spending data per pupil.
I think that's something
Yeah.
else to add, yeah, historic spending per pupil.
Yeah.
Okay. What do folks think about just a more general?
What does that tell you, though? Does that tell you, what does that tell you?
I'd like to see the trend on the spending per pupil.
And then say it goes up significantly the last 2 years. Are you gonna have questions then and ask? What kind of questions would you ask about?
Then I can look at the projected enrollment through a different lens. And I can see if we are spending the same per pupil, then our budget is gonna grow by 12% or whatever. You see, it's a different,
You're looking at it like that, okay?
yeah.
Not in terms of the implications of what went on at the school associated with those changes.
I'm not following. I'm trying to establish a trend in spending per pupil.
Right after COVID, I know that they had more expenses because they had students that had issues and problems, okay? So I'm just wondering, all right, so that was, their costs went up. So I'm wondering, is it gonna tell you, what is it gonna tell you?
Are you suggesting I shouldn't be asking for this?
I'm suggesting, I think that we should have some pointed questions. And I would be interested in knowing what are their biggest concerns going forward in this coming year? And what kind of financial implications are associated with that?
Well, I think we were asking that.
Yeah, we speak to
That's
that
already
top,
left.
top issues. We asked them to identify the top
Yeah, but
issues.
that's already in the letter, but, I think with Don, I like that to get historical data.
I think we spent more time talking about than they actually get it.
Yeah.
Right, they probably have it somewhere, they just need
Right.
to
Yeah.
stick it in the slide.
Yeah, exactly right. I agree.
Okay, and I think that's a fairly straightforward change. We'll ask for historic per pupil spending. What do folks think about this idea of a general, request on performance outcomes? Since this is the first time we're asking for this.
Just
Um,
performance indicators, just say,
performance
what are your
indicators.
key performance indicators and, right?
Yeah. And I think that the school committee,
How are you?
represented here right now, is hearing what we're asking about specific types of information that could be used as a supplement during a conversation later on, but as far as the letter itself, make it general. Maybe that's one way, for example, John, can get some of the specific questions that he wants answered.
Does that, and I wanna invite Carrie to react to this, but before we do, John, does that start to get to what you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm also throwing it out, if everyone else says, I don't care, then. I don't care.
No, we're not, I think we said that at all.
I think if someone comes asking for money and you ask them to back up what they want, they're gonna give you what they want. So I do think you should be careful about that. But if everyone thinks that's the most fair way to start, because they're the educators and they might know the best statistics to show us, then great. I'm just asking for data. I think we should use data when we think about the spend, because otherwise we're just looking, I think the trend line's great. But what are we getting when we spend? Because we're having these town-wide battles over spend. And maybe we all say, holy cow, these dollars are the best spend we've ever done, even though they cost so much, because we're curing cancer with every kid who graduates high school, right? So let's do it. Or But I don't know, I feel like we're operating in a vacuum, so I'm just, I think any data is better than good data.
I think Johnny made a good point, because that question was asked by Parasha, if I recall, to the school committee on the hearings of the joint meeting, like, what are the strengths? What are your performance characteristics? Let's have them and would like to hear about those, so that question was asked over and over for the last 2 years that I've been here.
Okay, so what we're saying is we'll add a request for historic per pupil spending going back 5 years. And that's for the school letter. I think I would also suggest adding that for the Minuteman letter as well.
Mhm.
And then, for all 3 letters, key performance indicators. Okay,
A fair discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
The recipients will find what those are.
yeah, with historical, yeah, I
Yeah.
like that.
yeah, okay. I would like to take a vote. We do have a vote on the agenda, but before we do, Carrie, did you want to react to that? We welcome your input on that. I saw you.
Yeah, just really quickly,
I think you need to come up to that.
Somebody needs to give us a mic.
Well, yeah,
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. Just really quickly, thank you all for having me. We are happy to provide any data that you want. We have endless amounts of data. We collect so much data, and it's part of our job is to go through all of it. We're happy to share any of it that you'd like. That being said, I just want to reiterate sort of what Dee was saying, which is, I would just ask that you think about what data you do really need to inform your decision of creating a guideline versus, you know, your curiosity of what's happening in our schools, because again, we are very proud of what's happening. There's strengths, weaknesses, like any institution that we're constantly working through. But as we think about this packet, it is an incredibly time-consuming task that we are happy to do. But I would just ask that you're mindful of what your charge is and what our charge is as you think about that. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you. Okay. I would entertain a motion on, approving the letters to go out as amended, or as we discussed amending.
So moved.
Who moved it, Abby?
You have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Okay, I think we're ready for a vote.
Oh, sorry.
How did you amend it?
So just to recap, we are going to, for all 3 letters, we're going to include a new line on key performance indicators, both current and historic, going back 5 years. To the 2 school letters, we're gonna also add, historic per pupil spending going back 5 years.
And that would be to the regional school district, the public schools and the Minuteman.
Yes, the CPS and the regional district, those are in 1 letter. So when I say 2 letters, it's
Yeah.
those 2 and then.
So you're gonna ask them to define what a key performance indicator is? Yeah, what is a key performance indicator? What
How do
is
you
it?
measure your success?
The what?
How do you measure your success?
Right, so you're gonna ask them your key performance indicators, and they're gonna say our members, that our success is valued at A, B, and C, and this is the performance.
Over the last 5 years.
We're letting the schools and the town tell us how they measure their own
How they
success.
define.
How they define
Performance.
successful performance,
Okay.
and then we can ask questions, because there'll be informed questions based on information and based on understanding of
How they define performance. Okay. Okay,
So with that, are we ready for a vote?
We're ready.
Okay. Suresh Bhatia,
Yeah,
Kathy Poco.
Yes.
Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
John Groffalo,
Yes.
Pat Guy,
Yes.
Greg Gariello,
Yes.
me, Don Capagana, yes, Lindsay Liss,
Yes.
Dee Ordner,
yes,
Carmen Lee,
Aye.
Paul Rodriguez,
Yes.
Quasi Sedgwirsman,
Yes.
Sri Trupel,
Yes.
Lois Fawcett.
yes,
Have I missed anyone?
14. That's it, Peggy's not here.
Right.
Or he's it.
Peggy, where is she?
Okay, so I'll revise the letters and then, the tradition is that the guidelines chair sends them, so Lindsay, I can get those to you tomorrow. Okay. Good discussion. The next item also, well, the next bullet also under item number 4 is to review and vote to approve our fiscal year 26 guideline metrics. And I'm gonna turn it over to Lindsay for that presentation.
I think these slides are in here unless you want me to present.
Eric, you pull up the slides.
Yeah, I have, I'll just share the packet.
Right.
You full screen. Next to the X, to the right. It just seems like a.
Show webinar? No,
No, that's all right. It seems to be fitting now.
okay.
All right, so tonight we're going to talk through the metrics to inform guidelines for fiscal year 2026. And so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just recapping everything, just because, we might have some new viewers from the public watching or reading the minutes, and I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page as to the guidelines process and kind of where we are in the process here. And then, so there's a couple slides on that, and then the last 2 slides actually get into what the metrics are for this year. And we can have a discussion about them. All right, so you can, right here. So this is a slide everyone's seen before. This is what I presented last month and maybe even the month before, but just as providing an overview of what the guidelines process is. So every year, the finance committee establishes guidelines in collaboration with the town and schools. So we're starting that process. We started that process last month and we're continuing it now. And our guidelines are the recommendations for increases in spending for spending that is subject to guidelines. Not all spending that the town does, not all of the budget for the town and the schools is spending subject to guidelines. About half of the town's budget is subject to guidelines, and almost all of the school's budget is subject to guidelines. And that is because certain items such as debt service, employee benefits, and some certain things like debt service and employee benefits are not included in spending that is subject to guidelines. So when we're establishing guidelines, we're trying to balance a lot of different things. So, and if everything was all even, this would be an easy process, but there's always competing goals. So we're always trying to consider that there are real, increases in costs, in the cost of doing business and the cost of keeping employees and of buying goods and services. So those costs go up every year, and we need to consider that. And if those costs went up at the same rate as people's ability to pay, we'd be in good shape. But those things aren't always in concert. So taxpayers' ability to pay for services is often different than the cost of goods and services increases. So because those are mismatched, we have to figure out a way to balance those competing priorities. So we have to listen to what everyone is saying, and kind of our job is with the guideline process is to establish a number that is fair, that recognizes all of these different competing priorities and tries to find a compromise within. So along the way, we want to involve the community here too as well. All right, so that's just a recap of the guidelines process. You can go to the next slide. So yeah, you can head to the next one. All right, so as we're thinking about, so obviously these request letters are going out tomorrow. That's going to inform a lot of what we do with the guidelines. What are the towns and schools saying about their needs, right? But we in terms of so that's kind of the bottoms up. But from a top-down perspective, it's also valuable to understand what's going on in the economy generally, with with the cost of employing people, you know, our inflation related to employment, inflation relative to costs of goods and services, and then taxpayers' ability to pay. So on a top-down basis, we look at some metrics that are published by the Congressional Budget Office, which is our kind of best, this is a huge government entity that's tasked with projecting out inflation and over time. They're not always right, you know, actually they get it wrong a lot, but you know, that's what projections are. But they're that goes back and forth year over year. And it's really our best source for economic outlook projections. So what we do is we take the most recent data available, and lucky for us, every year in June or July, they publish this data. So it's right in line with our guidelines process. They publish data for what they're projecting is going to happen over the next, 16 quarters or so. And we take that data and they're projecting out what they think is going to happen with income growth, what they think is going to happen with employment cost growth, what they think is going to happen with goods and services cost growth. And we take that data and we translate it back to our own fiscal year and look at the exact quarters that we're interested in and try and use and come up with metrics. And those metrics are projected growth in personal income growth per capita, net of inflation over the fiscal year 2026 period, projected nominal personal income growth per capita. So that's unadjusted for projected inflation, and then projected inflation relative to the town and schools expenses. So a blended rate of wage growth and goods and services cost growth. So we look at those three things, and again, we're adjusting everything to align with our own fiscal year, and these are projections. And just to have some metrics that we can look at and say, when we come up with a guideline number, this allows us to kind of have a check, is it within the realm of what's happening in the rest of the economy, the things that we're seeing costs in our own town. And is it going to, and how do we think it's going to affect our taxpayers here in terms of their ability to pay? So an important thing to note is that metrics are not guidelines, right? So there's nothing that says that we have to publish a guideline number that is in line with these metrics. That ultimately we as a committee kind of decide what the right guideline is. But there's just one tool, and I think it's like kind of the first thing that we can calculate and figure out one set of numbers that kind of, at least, like I said, give us a little check to say, is what the schools are requesting, is what the town is requesting, is it in line with kind of what the overall economy is projected to see? All right, so with that, I'll show you the numbers for this upcoming year. So you go to the next slide. On this slide, I have what we had this most recent year on the left. So fiscal year 2025 is the year that we just, completed, and we're looking at fiscal year 2026. So last year, our metrics were the nominal income growth is per capita is in yellow. The brown bar is the real personal income growth per capita is in the yellow bar. The brown bar is nominal personal income growth per capita projected. These are all projected. And then the blue bar is projected inflation relative to Concord's school and town expenses. So this is kind of, these metrics give you a general idea, at least, of what is projected to happen with ability to pay. So that's the yellow and brown bars, and then costs, so what the budget's pressures look like. So not too different from last year, but slightly different, with income growth being slightly higher and inflation on employment and goods and services being slightly lower. What questions do you have? Go ahead.
Okay, couple questions. My understanding is this is basically the same process that we followed from last year, right?
That's right.
Okay. Did you take a look at, and I think it's interesting, the inflation rate is going down. instead of
Mhm.
going up. Kind of meshes with what I know what's happened with the economy in general, and causing you, feel free to correct me on that, because you're the financial whiz around among others here. But the question I have is this, part of the assumption here in the little teeny footnotes is a proration of 80% to 20% of how the Concord's projected cost breakdown is done. That's a carryover from last year. Have you thought about whether that 80-20 split should be changed? And if so, what's your thought process?
Yeah, so when I estimated this, I think it's about the same. So, you know, I estimated, looking kind of at the number, so. I'll say that's not going to change this number more than like a tenth or two of a basis. I don't think that that's going to change much if I really sharpen my pencil, but that is something that I've estimated the 80-20 this year.
Should it be 80-20? That's value.
Well, that's based on actuals though. I'm looking at actuals for the most recent year. So if we're looking at actual costs, so I'm looking at the actual cost for the town and schools in the most recent fiscal year, and it does break out about 80-20 in people versus goods and services.
So you looked at that.
Yes, that's
I
actual.
appreciate you doing
Yeah.
that. It's great being able to say, yeah, we did it last year, we'll do it again, but
Yes,
each year we should think, does the split up make sense? Do these numbers still make sense?
Yeah.
Is it still good going forward?
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Lindsay, do you think that, since that blue bar is Concord's, it's intended to be Concord specific? And that this year, and with 80% of our costs being salary, this year being the year in which we're seeing the new negotiated salaries, that we should take that into consideration, and in that blue bar. I'm not saying necessarily in studying the guideline, but in understanding the cost inflation within the town.
I think that's a good suggestion. So in other words, so rather than kind of muddy this, I think that is something else we should consider as another input, and we will.
And with that would be reflected in the information we're gonna get from the budgeting.
Yes, exactly.
So I think it doesn't necessarily affect the metric, but as part of it, that's the bottom up.
Bottoms up, so this is kind of a
That could
top down.
affect how we decide the guideline. This is the top down, which is looking at a more general.
Without that kind of context.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's a good thing for us to be focusing on as we're evaluating the information we're getting.
Thanks.
And I think that kind of information is more valuable than this kind of information in general. So, yeah.
Which is why we need.
it all.
The budgeting
Yeah.
entities.
Any other questions? And then the final slide here provides a little more context. So Eric actually pulled these numbers from prior years as to what the final guidelines that we issued were. So this is not metrics. So the previous slide was the metrics to inform guidelines. These are actual guidelines. So these are the actual guidelines we gave to the town, to CPS and to CCRSD in fiscal year 23, 24, and 25. And so those of you who were here last year, remember that, and you can see the asterisk on 25. For the operating budgets, we gave everybody the same, but we did put tier 1 capital for the town in its own bucket. And so the blended for the town was actually 4.45. But if we're talking about, so that's the asterisk for 2025. So if you actually put that back in, the town number is 4.45.
And just to also further put these in context, it was for fiscal year 25. I think that was the first year we used this system for the metrics. Lindsay?
I think so.
I think it was, and the prior years, we had used a set of metrics that were more backward looking. So this was a change in how we did the metrics. So the guidelines for prior years were calculated on a different basis.
right, I think that's all I've got.
Any discussion? Or platform questions? Our intention is to vote on these tonight, and this, as Lindsay said, this is not, we're not setting the guidelines, we still got a ways to go on that, this is. Aligning on the input, a key set of inputs for the guidelines.
So is that,
Fine.
that's gonna include the comments that were made by Don? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, we already
No.
voted. Sorry, go ahead.
That,
Different comments?
no, the information that Don was saying should be considered before we reach the guideline
Yeah,
is information we don't have. It's
Oh,
information
yeah.
we will get
okay.
from the budgeting units, if it turns out that these proportions are wrong in some way, that what's actually going on is different from what's going on.
Right.
The Congressional Budget Office calculations,
Mhm.
we'll have that information from the budgeting units before we set the actual guidelines.
So we're voting on the process?
We're voting on these, on whether or not we want to adopt these metrics
These
to guide our
metrics?
process, but.
To help
these
guide
are
our
not-
process.
Okay,
That's it.
So moved.
second.
So,
Good.
so move meaning that to adopt the metrics to inform guidelines as presented in these slides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
discussion. I'm always totally wrong when I, in my head, try to estimate which items are gonna take longer. Okay, if no discussion, I think we're ready for a roll call.
Yeah, okay. Suresh Bhatia,
I,
Kathy
Yes.
Poplar, Eric Dalbert,
Yes,
John Groffalo.
Yes.
Zach Guyer,
Yes.
Greg Ariello.
Yes.
Me, Don Kupka, yes. Lindsay List,
Yes.
Dee Ordner,
Yes,
Carlin Reed,
I,
Paul Rodriguez,
Yes.
Quasi Sabruzman,
Yes.
Sri Trooper,
Yes.
Lois Bossack.
Yes,
because
And the vote is unanimous.
14 yes, 0 no, no extension.
okay. Thank you, Lindsay. Item number 5, chair and liaison reports, and the first bullet is reminder on open meeting law / conflict of interest obligations. So I wanted to share with committee members that this is just in the interest of transparency, and this is a precedent that Greg has set in previous years, which I think is a good one, that in the context of the discussion we started last month on a pilot program. I have a personal relationship with one of the institutions that we discussed engaging in future pilot discussions. I reached out to the State Ethics Commission. They have they call it the Attorney for a Day program. You can call and get advice and guidance from them when issues like this come up. I called, they were extremely responsive and professional and I dare say pleasant to work with. They advised me to file a disclosure with our appointing authority, who's the moderator. And I did that. And what it amounts to is, while I believe I can conduct myself fairly and impartially on the issue, on the pilot issue, if it were to happen that the institution with which I have a relationship were to come up directly, in other words, if we were to, I don't foresee this happening, if we were to talk as a committee about which institutions to approach about the pilot program or how to engage them, strategy on communication, that would be the right point for me to recuse myself, and I will do that. In doing that, like I said, I was extremely impressed with just the process and the State Ethics Commission and that program. So I wanted to share just a friendly reminder to folks that if you have questions about your own circumstances, you can reach out to them. They're great to work with. I couldn't believe they got right back to me. And the process is very straightforward. we're on the hook, we all sign that conflict of interest form, we're on the hook essentially to police ourselves when it comes to this stuff. So this is not me, it's not my, it's not my role as your chair this year to kind of enforce this. So consider this a friendly reminder. Kind of,
Not about you, but about me. I also filed a conflict of interest disclosure at the request of my appointing authority, because I also work for the town clerk's office. And I filed it with Karitari to let you know that I was. That if some issues arise where there's a conflict between finance committee and the town clerk's office, I would recuse myself from that discussion. And that's something that I filed, geez, I did that a while back, a couple months ago, while back. But it is also a very simple process to do, and that's part of what you do, is you say, hey, okay, this is my perspective, and this is what I'm going to do.
okay, thank you. And Greg, you shared your disclosure.
Yeah, so every year I do it, everybody who's been on the committee know previously that I disclose, I filed 5 years ago. My, what was it called, the appearance of a conflict of interest. Those that know, the middle school building committee is led up by my wife, Dawn Royello. I joined the committee before that committee was formed, so obviously 2 names. Financial interest, people see that there's deemed no conflict of interest. I have not recused myself because there is none, but I have not voted or actually taken part in discussions. There's one that I did take discussion in, and that was the most recent one where we went out for a little bit more money for the
10 million.
yeah, for the 10 million. I did vote in that one, but
You've been very clear about that.
yeah, so every year I forwarded my letter to our appointing authority, and I forwarded it every year to the chair as well, just to state that I do have that. I think everybody can see that with 2 names the same, so. It's a little bit easier to see on my end.
Okay. Thank you all. Liaison report. Thanks everybody for your contributions to the liaison report. I'll pull it up. I find this extremely informative. So please keep them coming. I won't go through it. That'll defeat the purpose of taking the time to. But I will flag, Lois really went above and beyond this last time and shared an extensive, write-up of the first pilot work group, as well as a recap of the most recent, housing roundtable. So Lois, I'll turn it over to you if you'd like to just hit on the high points of either or both of those.
Well, the meeting on Concord was fascinating, really interesting. Anthony had arranged for the former CFO in Brookline to come and talk to us about it. It's going to be a long process, but one of the things we talked about at the committee is the importance of identifying new sources of revenue as a way of alleviating at least some of the pressure on residential taxes. So this is early stages. I'm not gonna repeat what's in the report. But this will be something, what you said November 1st, we're going to come back with is it good time around?
Yeah, we have some scheduling. that we have to
Yeah,
work
we'll
for, so,
talk about it.
Yeah,
There's gonna be another meeting in early September. But it's a very, very interesting process, and it's Carrie is working on it, Mary Hartman and Anthony and me, and this it'll take time to get it hooked, but it was fascinating hearing how it grew in Brookline and starting to think about ways that we can create something that would really work for Concord. And not overly burden the private schools and nonprofits that are really a very important part of our community and really create the character of the town.
yeah, so the goal is to November for that policy, yes, you're right.
Yeah. And and the other thing that I did was go to the Concord Housing Roundtable, which was also fascinating. I've been chained to this radiator now for about 4 years. I'm starting to like it. It's very, there are 7 groups that are involved in that. And a lot of it is just interesting and informative, but not something that's within our purview. One thing that could be coming back to us is that there has been interest on the part of the CPC There hasn't yet been a formal proposal made at the CPC because they didn't have a quorum for their last meeting, or it might have happened then.
I showed up, but it didn't count.
But there is some interest in, on the part of the CPC in starting, in proposing an increase in the 1.5% rate that funds, that they can, that now, was basically full taxation. And there's interest in increasing that to 2% to create more revenue for affordable housing and to both increase the percentage collected from the citizens and also to set a higher percentage for the CPC that has to be allocated to affordable housing. I think it's at a relatively preliminary stage, but it wouldn't be surprising to see a warrant article on that for upcoming town meeting. And that is something we should be watching pretty carefully and be aware of.
Yeah, their concern has been the delay in getting the
Whole rule petition on getting
the over 1 million home sales
right,
funding.
the real estate transfer fee that would be imposed when houses sell over a certain amount. And that money, it would be a way of generating a fund to support affordable housing efforts. But that hasn't happened at the state level, so this is a way of filling that in. There was also discussion in the meeting, which is relevant to us, that there's a concern about funding because there's an awareness on the part of the 7 different entities that are dealing with affordable housing in town, that free cash may not continue to be available to supplement their activities because of other demands on free cash and the lower amount there is in free cash. So it's that, a lot of other interesting stuff happened in the meeting, but that's what was relevant to us. And Carlin sent me a note that I'll just mention. One of the things that came up at the meeting that was interesting is that we are now past the 10% requirement that said our affordable housing availability is over 10% and will go up even further when 240B projects that are now in planning stages come to fruition. So Carlin asked whether there had been any discussion at the roundtable about whether or not you needed this extra funding, given what's going on.
We almost say for a second to say, do we have enough subsidized housing, but, and their stats are 15%, 16% by the time we housing. At what point do we say, okay, let's use the funds for something else? We've got enough.
Good, very good.
Everybody.
But you're not gonna get that at the housing roundtable because they all want it. So it's an advocacy position. My interest in sending this to you, thank you for bringing up, is to say, okay, guys, there's another position on this. Is that, and we're gonna be asked to give our position on the CPC article for $740,000 that the housing trust is gonna ask, and our position on, well, maybe won't be, about the use of the ARPA funds that are being pulled for housing.
That's another source of funding that housing groups in town are aware will dry up. And they are looking for, there's $500,000 that's been allocated for this year, but whether or not, this is the last year. And I don't know whether or not that money is, can be unallocated. I understand that the expectation is that $500,000 is already been allocated to affordable housing. It's an interesting question. This was not the forum where people were gonna raise objections, though one member of the roundtable did express some concern about additional taxation in a tax-sensitive environment and how that might feed a re-examination of the real estate exemption. Yeah. So because that been looked at by the select board again, and the data's being compiled to see what the impact of that has been. So it was interesting, but that should be on our radar, and any of us who are liaisons for committees that are in this area, like the, Housing Trust or the CPC, yeah, should be aware of this as something that might be coming down the pipe and be thinking about what finance committee's role would be.
Did they say what their goal is, like 4% of inventory that is considered affordable housing?
No, my recollection is they did talk more about the definition of what's affordable, that some of the things that fall into that affordable bucket are actually pretty expensive because they're allocated to people who are at a certain percentage of the mean income. So there's some
80% of the median income of the jurisdiction is a jurisdiction, so it's because we're in a relatively wealthy town.
It's a big number.
It's a big number.
Okay, so, but there wasn't any. I don't recall anybody talking about a specific target.
Yeah, because as they talk about this increase, maybe that's a question to
Right.
press them on.
Right.
What is the goal and have we not met it? And what will this help us meet it? Right? How will this help us meet it?
Depending on what we hear at future committee meetings on this issue, it might be, if I hear what, depending on what I'm hearing at the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, I may be getting in touch with Eric and asking to consider inviting them to one of our meetings. I would encourage the rest of you who are going to those meetings, think about that. We might want to be proactive as this evolves.
Yeah, I was liaison years prior, and so there was the worry that we weren't getting to the 10th. And the implications on the town of not being at the 10th. But now with these two projects coming in, it probably is a good time to ask.
Even without those two projects, I think we're at about 12, and with those two projects, because those are both very good projects. It's the residents of Thoreau and the Novo 40B, those are fairly large projects, so that'll change there. They'll have some,
Okay,
so sorry,
thank you both. Minutes. Oh, John.
If we have a question for a liaison officer, should it be aired publicly for the committees, or should we go to down separately, just cover the laws?
I think now's the time, if you have one, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Light plan is the municipal, so, some well-informed citizens have told me that our utility costs are around 30% higher than all our competing towns, and I know the enterprise fund, et cetera, but that impacts the residents' ability to pay on a forward basis, so that hasn't been raised. Maybe you could ask them if that is correct.
I'm happy to do that. I know there are two ways of measuring it. One is, are you looking at all the towns or you're looking at all the towns that have municipal light plants? Because the percentage is different. If you compare yourself for us
Fair
against
question.
Eversource,
I don't know.
National Grid, I don't know, it's because I've looked at that statistic before, and it depends on if you're using all the towns or just the ones that have light plants. But you're right, electricity is expensive, and we're encouraging the town people to use more of it. Yeah. We'll do, I'll carry that.
Question, I think it was regarding municipalities only. Cause I had that same question asked, and it was comparing municipal electric companies, municipal electric companies.
Okay, other discussion related to liaisons.
Yeah, just a quick, there was a meeting this afternoon, Concord, MCI Concord. And there will be a public hearing, DCAM, which is the state's department that's responsible for the disposition of the MCI Concord site, will hold their first public meeting on September 12th. I just wanted to bring it up here, that's before our next FinCom meeting. And they are required to hold 3 public meetings, and these meetings are intended to be this is the vehicle through which they will gather the input of Concord, what will become of that site. So I don't want to waste any of the opportunities, the 3 opportunities we're given to give them feedback. So I would encourage everyone to consider attending that and being vocal, but.
Is there, has, the town formulated, the committee that you're liaison with, has anybody formulated any ideas as to what we want?
Way too early to have an informed opinion about from the committee on what to do. However, the clock is ticking anyway, so I would say, Kathy, no, we don't have a position.
So it's hard to
But-
advocate of that meeting if we don't know what we want.
Except to say that we, well, in a nutshell, the state has 2 priorities, clean energy and affordable housing. I think that as a town, we want to layer into that discussion, a diversification of our tax base and having something be upbeat, because we're about 96%, I believe it is, residential property tax rate. And if we had, say, 400 units of housing, the cost to educate the students would exceed the tax revenue coming from it. So that, I just throw that out there.
And that's good information that should be shared at those meetings.
It should be.
Okay.
They're just not, this is me talking right now as the liaison, but the committee is not in a position to say that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. We'll move on to minutes.
Minutes.
We have the minutes of July 18th.
Any
I have
edits?
one edit, the minutes that I've created. I'm going to be modifying it to show that 3 people were participating online. They went back to the video. There are 3 people who participated online. There were Peggy, Paul, and Suresh. This is for the July 18 minutes. So I'm gonna make that amendment to show that those 3 are participating online.
Great.
That's the only edit that I wanted to make this.
All right. Any other comments?
I move that we approve the minutes of July 18th.
Second.
As amended.
Okay. Just any discussion? Hearing none, I think we're ready for a roll call.
Okay, Suresh. Kathy Coulter.
Yep.
Eric Dahlberg.
Yes.
John Rockland.
Yes.
Becca.
Yes.
Greg Doriel.
Abstain.
Don Pupka, yes. Lindsay, yes.
Yes.
Dee Ordner.
Yes.
Carly Lee.
Aye.
Paul Rodriguez.
Yes.
Trustee Brusman.
Yes.
Tree Tuple.
Yes.
Lois Boswell.
Yes.
Okay, so passes with 13 yeses, well, yay,
13 aye,
13 aye.
0 nay, and 1 abstention.
One abstention.
Okay, thank you. Correspondence, meeting room.
No, just what was in your package, which was basically your information to the board, just updating them and goals and so forth, so. No, just for the sake of transparency, just sharing your emails.
Okay, thank you. Our last item, recapping action items, I captured 3 in the course of our discussions tonight. One, I'll circle back to Mary as chair of the select board to let her know we further discussed the capital planning process and the approach from the joint meeting. We're generally receptive, though we do have questions and expect additional discussion. 2, also for me, I will revise the budget request letters as amended and get those to Lindsay to send out tomorrow. And then 3, for the liaison discussion we just had, for John's request, Colin as liaison to the municipal light plan will ask about rates relative to other municipalities. Did I miss anything?
That one's good.
Okay, our next meeting, so we have that site visit set for Thursday at 6 p.m. We're gonna start at the DPW out on Kai's Road. That'll be about an hour, and then we're gonna head to the police and fire station on Walden for another hour with them. I'd like to thank Anthony for arranging this. I reached out to request this. I didn't think you'd be able to make it happen so soon. I know this week is probably not the best timing. It's the height of August vacation week, but the date works, so I figured let's go for it. So that will be a meeting of the finance committee. It won't be obviously a normal meeting, but we will meet, for purposes of the site visit. Our next regular meeting is gonna be September 26th. Okay, our schedule, I'll pull it up here, I won't go through it, but just as a visual. Our schedule, previously had a September meeting on September the 12th. And Anthony very proactively put a hold on calendars for that September 12th meeting, but that subsequently changed. So he removed the hold. I just want to make sure folks know, because I know sometimes calendars don't sync. And if you have that hold, you can disregard it. No September 12th. The next meeting is September 26th. I will always, and there's a few instances of this happening. And this is my fault. I changed the calendar. We'd already sent out holds. I will go in, yeah, I will go in and flag the meetings that are no longer happening, but a good rule of thumb. You'll always hear from me leading up to a meeting with the agenda, with the request for liaison reports and the packet and everything else, so. If you don't hear from me, chances are it ain't happening. We will get it cleaned up.
Okay.
Okay, so September 26th is the next meeting.
Great.
That's at 6:30?
That'll be at 6:30. Okay, with that, I think we're good to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
No.
all in
Okay.
favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Good.